Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being invited to this session. Well, I am a representative of the government of Catalonia, which is a region that is in the northeast of Spain. I will talk briefly about one program that we have developed there that we call Voluntary Agreement Program with Business. Global climate change negotiations evolve slower than the world needs and probably science demands. So far, states have not achieved a global agreement framework to tackle climate change, and unfortunately, this situation would last some additional years. In my opinion, the complexity of climate change negotiations, it is due to the geostrategic dimension of several issues that determine in a definite way the climate change: energy, water, soil. As I said before, everything indicates that during the next few years we will live without a global agreement. You would agree with me that the atmosphere does need an agreement because it is urgent to manage greenhouse gases concentrations. So far, it was expected to have a global agreement analog to the Kyoto Protocol. Annex 1 parties agreed an emission reduction by means of a top-down scheme. Greenhouse gases emissions are established by each party, and then a sectoral and territorial reduction is distributed. We think that a bottom-up scheme based on a multi-level and a multi-stakeholder action could be a complementary way to fill up the gap we are facing. Key actors of this scheme are business, civil society, and local and subnational governments. Let me give you one example of what we are doing in Catalonia in these issues. We believe that supporting public and private initiative is one mechanism to tackle climate change through a political action. Business have an important role to play. To do so, national, subnational, and local governments have to provide them the proper conditions and work together with those organizations that are moving towards the right direction. In this line, the government that I represent promotes voluntary agreement with companies. I will explain briefly that the voluntary agreements are and what its potential is for coming years. Voluntary agreements are established by companies that are outside the emission trading scheme from the European Union. Voluntary agreements are a solid and rigorous scheme, and this rigorousness doesn't make it easy for companies to join the program. As first stage, organizations should calculate their emissions inventory. We work methodology with ISO 14064 because we did not want to establish a new standard, so we used the standards that already exist. This standard, the 14064, provides 3 scopes of emission calculation. The first scope covers direct emissions of the organizations by basically energy consumption. The second scope includes indirect emissions from energy consumption, especially related to electrical power consumption. And the third scope is aimed to monitor the organization's carbon footprint by a life cycle analysis methodology. Voluntary agreements require that companies calculate scope 1 and 2. The scope 3 is optional due to its complexity. Once companies have their inventory, we established together an annual emission reduction action plan. These actions have to be monitored, reported, and verified by an independent company at the end of the year. This process goes on and on. All data from the inventory and established actions are public in order to guarantee transparency. Once the organization has calculated its emissions inventory and carries out reduction actions, can offset those emissions that have not been able to reduce. The government supports the organizations aiming to be carbon neutral. However, we believe that in order to become carbon neutral, what it is needed at the first stage is to know how much emissions you produce. Then you are able to reduce them and offset them. In some cases, organizations have directly offset their emissions, but we believe that the best way to achieve a global reduction is to first assess the emissions, then reduce them, and as the last option, to offset emissions. A year after launching this initiative, 25 organizations have joined the Voluntaries Agreement Program. Let me introduce you a few of them. In one side, you have two, let's say, official institutions. One university, the University of Girona, that is a small-sized university in the Catalan system, and in the other side, a building from the Environmental Administration. In another side, the SADA Group, which is the biggest chicken slaughterhouse in Catalonia. Also have joined the program 3 companies from the public transportation sector and who cover the metropolitan area of Barcelona. The metropolitan area of Barcelona has almost 3 million of inhabitants. One of these companies, Barcelona Metropolitan Transportation, is making research on hybriding its blue bus fleet. By means of their services, their own services, the Barcelona Metropolitan Transportation has developed its own applied technology in buses. This is a very clear exponent of how tackling climate change becomes an innovation element in organizations and how, with their own resources, a 10-year diesel fleet can be renewed. Most of the reduction measures that have been implemented deal with low carbon technologies in the field of communications, energy efficiency in buildings, and transport. What are the government expectations for the future? Of course, we expect that more organizations join the program. So far, in most of the positive cases, the commitment and decision of reducing emissions is being a mature initiative within the corporation policy. We are talking about big organizations where decision-making requires a long process, usually. Likewise, the program is really addressed to small and medium enterprises, companies which are Catalonia's core industrial sector, the 80% of the total. We provide them with the necessary technical resources to monitor their emissions inventory, and we help them to identify the actions to be carried out. We have worked very closely, for example, with the wine sector also, one of the most relevant economic sectors in Catalonia. According to its exportation ratios, the people employed, or how much it's integrated into the territory. Its awareness and commitment to climate action has been very challenging, but once more a great opportunity of innovating. Because of these reasons, it is of our interest their involvement in the Voluntaries Agreement Program, not only for the reduction of emissions, but the leveraging effect that the wine sector can induce within the Catalan food sector. We are also working with the textile sector, another traditional sector in our territory. This sector is facing nowadays the effects of globalization and has to redefine its strategies, taking into account, in some cases, their carbon footprint. We hope they will be joining the program very, very soon. Joining the program is free. Organizations only need to pay the verification of their inventory and their reduction measures. By joining the program and reducing emissions, organizations are distinguished with a specific label and mention. On the advantages of joining the program, besides improving their corporate image, economical savings are achieved, basically on energy consumption, but also reducing their wastes, improving their market positioning or innovation are other advantages of the program. Likewise, we are working to establish tax reductions to these organizations joining the program. Moreover, we believe these organizations may have some advantages to access to grants or a privileged position on public procurement. The fact the Voluntary Agreements Program is more than a declaration helps the government to enhance the initiative and include new aspects and advantages. So finally, I should say that this initiative is an example of a public-private collaboration which shows off how much committed is business sector to climate action and demonstrates the economic advantages can definite. Moreover, it also demonstrates how subnational governments create a framework in which business can win credibility by reducing their emissions and outreaching the measures carried out. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you.